And let's see whether the slides are moving.
Yeah, just checking. Give me a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, they're moving.
Betsy ma'am, shall we?
Yeah, it's 7. So why don't we start the program?
Yeah, sure.
Just a moment. Okay, Dr. Shanti
Yeah, ma'am.
face is not completely. Will you just move a little bit away? Now I think it's okay. Yes. So please begin, Meera.
Yeah, yes. So good evening to one and all present here. So happy to see you all present here on this virtual platform for the serious, enlightening, as well as very entertaining deliberations on various thoughts that we take up every time through the different sessions of the Chrysalis. Now, Chrysalis 3 started in the academic year 2023-2024. It's backed by the Chrysalis 2 and 1 in those sessions in the previous years. So this venture of this research and PG Department of English in collaboration with IQAC, St. Aloysius College, Thrissur, Kerala, India, it's actually a commemorative lecture series which is done in fond remembrance of our beloved teachers, Dr. Dhanya Menon, Reverend Father Anthony Kutikat, and Professor M.T. Paul Davis. Today's presentation is done by Dr. S. Annapurni, and today's chair is Dr. Shanti Lakshmi. So before moving on further, introducing both of these dignitaries here, I would like to welcome Betsy Ma'am, the Director of Research Center, St. Aloysius College, for always being the backbone of all programs that we organize here. Without much ado, let me introduce you to the presenter of today's session. Today's presentation is by Dr. S. Annapurni, Assistant Professor and HOD of English at Memorial College of Arts and Science, Chennai. The title of her presentation is Defamiliarization in Translation of Sangam Poems, and she is a recipient of Professor Seduraman Prize for Literature. And her research interests are in Indian theatre in translation and women's studies. So, with much pleasure, on behalf of the entire department and everyone present here, I welcome you for today's forum.
Thank you.
Yeah. The chair for the day is Dr. Viz. E. Shanti Lakshmi, Dean of Students, Dr. M.G.R. Janaki College for Arts and Science for Women, Chennai. Her research was in the pre-modern Indian theatre. A curriculum designer for the UG students of University of Madras. She is involved in many translation and technical writing projects. A very dedicated researcher and author, she has also coordinated various national and international conferences and has served as the HOD of English, NAC coordinator, and vice principal of her college. With immense pleasure and gratitude, I welcome you for today's forum. And I'm handing over the session to you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you, Meera. First and foremost, I would like to welcome you all. And I would like to begin this session by thanking St. Aloysius College, Thrissur, and especially the Research and Postgraduate Department of English in collaboration with IQAC for organizing this wonderful lecture series, which will definitely serve as a platform to generate intellectual deliberations. Today, as academicians, it's very heartening to note that research, which in recent times seems to be confined to universities, finds a favorable place in colleges. So I really appreciate the efforts taken by this college to promote and support research activities which expands one's knowledge base. So all of us know that research, the primary reason for research or the source of research is to learn, is to promote knowledge and to learn about a topic. So we are here trying to understand new ideas, new thoughts, because English department today, the research department is no longer confined to language and literature. Now, translation is a very important activity on almost all the research departments, because we started with comparative studies, and now literature, translation, the works on and about translation, technical aspects of translation has become a very important aspect of research. So, as the students of literature, we realize that we depend on translations to understand different cultures and different literatures. So, when we talk about our own translations, when I say our own translations, translations from within our own nations, we think about within our own neighboring states or within our own country. So, we generally talk about Sangam literature. Dr. Annapurni, I'm sure, will be dwelling deep into it. I'm just going to mention that it is a classical literature where all of us have been amused, not amused, we are thrilled to understand these poems, Sangam poems, because sometimes it makes us feel that we do not know much about our own past. Sometimes when we read these literatures, we look at it with awe, because look at our own forefathers, how they have been building their culture, their relationship, and how environment has played a key role in their poems. Right today, we are talking about environmental studies also. So whatever we say as a modern literature today, we can find that in our own literatures, right? So we are going to talk about. I'm sure Annapurni is going to talk about all this, and we'll have enough questions to ask her, because these topics are new to us. Because she's going to dwell on a topic which is not dwelt that easily by most of the researchers, because translations are many, because all of us don't read Tamil, and we have these wonderful translations by passionate writers who have tried to understand these literatures and then give it to us in English. A special word here about A.K. Ramanujam, his translation of Sangam poetry. And we have this as part of our curriculum also. And teaching this has not been easy, because these poetry, much as we know, is part of our own culture, there is a danger of oversimplifying it. Because when I handle these poems in class, it seems to be very easy at the superficial level. But here we have to appreciate the translation techniques used by a writer. And this is only possible when the translator himself is passionate about what he is doing. Because he has that in, I think A.K. Ramanujam himself has told in his interviews, where he says, you have to be proud about, not just proud, you have to believe in what you are doing. You have to feel that doesn't come easily. Just because you're a Tamilian, it doesn't come to you, right? So you have to understand and then make it understandable to others. So that is a very difficult part. And all of us, as students of literature, we enjoy reading A.K. Ramanujam's poems, Sangam poems. The techniques used are different. And we have Dr. Annapurni here, a very eminent scholar, voracious reader, and a very passionate teacher who does not just take her classes very easily. Shows that there is research happening in the class. So we are all eagerly waiting, Dr. Annapurni, to listen to your lecture, and I'm sure we will jot down whatever is coming out. On to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. I will begin by thanking Dr. Betsy Paul and St. Aloysius College, the Research and Postgraduate Department of English, for thinking of me as one of the resource person for their lecture series called Chrysalis. So when Betsy Paul ma'am reached out to me, I was slightly hesitant because of the date. It was too close to, from the day we spoke to the day of the event, which was 8th of February. So I told her I have 3 topics in mind, and I suggested all 3 to her, 2 of which were things that I was very familiar with, which was theatre. I told her I could talk about women in Indian theatre. I told her I could also talk about another aspect of Indian theatre, I guess. The third was this, defamiliarization in Ramanujam's translation. And of course, she had to pick the most difficult one, which was this. Those two are things that most of us would be familiar with as students of literature. This is slightly away from our usual classroom discussions. So I would like to begin by thanking her for thinking of me and also making me present this today. The other thing that I wanted to do was also to tell you that this particular research article, research paper, whatever, all of the research that went into this paper, that came about as part of a classroom discussion. A.K. Ramanujam's translations from the poems of love and war, they are prescribed in the Madras University syllabus for MA. So when I was teaching at M.J. Janaki College, I happened to teach this particular paper, Indian Writing in Translation. Within that, there was this section on Sangam poetry. So I may be Tamilian, but my knowledge of Tamil, especially Sangam Tamil, is slightly, what can I say, very iffy. Yeah. So for me, the introduction to Sangam poetry was through Ramanujam's translation. And as part of the teaching process, we looked at Kurunji poems. I'll be talking about each of these poems, but when we look at Kurunji poems, they predominantly deal with love. And for 18 to 20-year-olds, teaching about love, talking about love in class was very exciting. So the question was, ma'am, what is so great about these translations? I mean, they're just talking about love poetry, and we have done enough love poetry, starting with the Elizabethan sonneteers and on to other kinds of romance poems. So what is so different about them? So I said, okay, let's go back to the origins of Sangam poetry and we look at the Tamil version. And when we read the Tamil version in class, it didn't make any sense. The one poem that we spent so much time exploring in English, when it came to the Tamil version, it didn't make any sense at all. I mean, there was only one word, Amma, that kind of made sense to me. The Amma was the only word I knew. The other words were seriously exotic words that even for a person with a speaking knowledge of Tamil was very difficult to understand. So that is when we started looking at how translations become a medium to kind of bring two languages together, to bring a text in a very unfamiliar language closer to the reader. So that is where we kind of situate Ramanujam's translation. The offshoot of this discussion and the classroom teaching was, there was I think it was in Delhi, yes, there was a seminar that was happening in Delhi that kind of dealt with the idea of familiar, exotic in all aspects of Indian writing. So somewhere there was a spark that said, why not think about Ramanujam's translations? Why not look at them in terms of how they make familiar Tamil poems to a non-Tamil reader? They make familiar, but at the same time, there is also this aspect of defamiliarization where he makes the reader work towards understanding the poem. So that is the origin of this particular paper, this discussion that we're having today. How the translations are kind of somewhere in the middle, a threshold space that looks back to the source language and the translated language, kind of bringing them together, but at the same time making the reader think about, work towards understanding the poem. So that is kind of the starting point of what I'm going to talk about today. So that was a quick introduction. So I'm going into the actual paper now. A very familiar quote that most of us would have heard from Robert Frost, saying poetry is what gets lost in translation. And I'm hoping that at the end of our discussion today, at the end of my presentation at least, we would understand that poetry is not lost in translation, but we do gain a poem when we translate. So this quote, it will be disproved, is what I'm claiming. Yeah. So what are Sangam poems? So we'll have a quick background to Sangam poems for those who are very unfamiliar with them. I'm taking a very open approach. So like me, there are many people who would not have heard of Sangam poems. These poems are roughly 2000 years old and they're all written in Tamil. As I said, the poems themselves are called, written in a language called Sangam Tamil. Okay? And what is this word Sangam that we keep repeating over? Sangam literally means an academy of scholars or poets. And these poems, they were written over a period of say 200 to 300 years, and they say that there were 3 academies or 3 sangams, and these poems are from the last sangam. They were collected, they were compiled into these 2 anthologies that we called as the Ettu Thogai or the 8 works and the Pattu Pattu or the 10 works. The first English translation came about thanks to G.U. Pope, the British missionary and Tamil scholar. But there are other translators that we do know about: George Hart, Mata Selby, Ramanujam himself, who worked in America, in Chicago, when he discovered these poems, as he says in his introduction to Poems of Love and War. He discovered them in the library, in an underground vault in the library. So this is his, introduction to these poems. Then there's Takanobu in Japan, Svelbil and Taiken in Europe, who have all been translating. Their translations are available online, Amazon, wherever you can find these translations, you can look through them. There have been translations by scholars, research scholars also. I found a couple online that I used. Vaidehi, one more person who had translated. Shivakumar, who is also a scholar who translated. So these are the available translations online. Now, what are these Sangam poems? The 2 important divisions that you would find in Sangam poems are the Agam and the Puram. The Agam, as the word suggests, is inner world, the world of the personal, of an individual, very subjective aspects. So you have themes like love predominantly, the union of lovers, their meeting, this very clandestine meeting, separation, the pangs of the separation, where they choose to elope or where they are separated, all of these aspects, scandals that people in society talk about them. All of these are aspects of Agam poems. Predominantly, the theme happens to be love. The other aspect of these Sangam poems are the social or the exterior aspects, which are the Puram poems. Puram poems basically deal with anything that is not love. So there is war, like you see in Ramanujam's title, Poems of Love and War, as he calls them. So there is war, valor of kings, their very munificence, the way they were towards the people. There's one example of a king called Pari, who helps a creeper plant by offering his own chariot for it to grow upon. So that is their ethics of public life, tenets of what it is to be a good citizen. All of these are Puram aspects, those that don't deal with love. So these are the 2 divisions. Now, my paper or this discussion is going to focus on the Agam poems. The Agam poems belong to all of these little anthologies: 400 short poems called Kuruntogai, 400 other poems called Natrinai. Then there is Aga Nanuru, which literally means 400 poems, Ainkurunuru, 500 poems, Kalitogai, which has 150 poems within them. Now, what is interesting about these poems is that all of the what do I call it? The critical aspects related to the poem are present in another book called Tolkappiyam. Now, this is what you would call a grammatical text, and within that grammatical text, you have these 3 elements that become very important within the Agam poems. The three main components of these poems, which are the Mudal, the Karu, and the Uri Porul. I know these words are in Tamil. I will try to give the exact equivalent in English as far as possible. Now, the Mudal here, Mudal Tamil word means the first. So it also refers to the time or the setting of the poem. The time and the place, the setting of the poem. So you have these four different regions that we speak about in Sangam land, which is Kurinji, which is the mountainous or hilly region. Then you have the Mullai, which is the forest or pasture land. Marudam, agricultural land. Neidal, which is somewhere near the seashore, coastal areas. And Palai, which is the desert wasteland. Time again is divided into the time of the day, the time of the year, seasons. All of these aspects come under Mudal. Now, Karu refers to the nucleus of the poem. Karu literally means nucleus, which are the flora and the fauna that are native to these four landscapes. The Kurinji, Mullai, Marudam, and Neidal. Let me go to the next, where you can see the Tinai. The Tinai, you see them here, and then you have the location where you find them, and we will come to this in a bit. Okay. Now, the Karu, as I said, refers to the flora and fauna that are native to a particular landscape. So, for example, when you look at the mountainous regions, there will be waterfalls, there will be elephants, there will be the Kurunji Poo itself, which blooms once in 12 years. There will be bees buzzing. There will be peacocks. These are some of the elements that you would find, the flora and the fauna that you would find in this particular region. Neidal, because it is seashore, obviously, there will be a reference to the waves, there will be a reference to ships, there is a reference to the seashells. You have the fisher folk being predominantly the main characters in these poems. So, lastly, you have the Uri Porul, which is the distinctive mood. Now, what is interesting is the idea that each region or Tinai, each location, has a human emotion that is attached to it. Now, this is the interesting part. What is the human emotion or mood attached to it? When it comes to Kurinji, the heightened emotion is union. Okay, Punardal is the word that we use, where it is the union of the lovers. Their first meeting, their first time together, mostly in the clandestine form. Okay, not known to other people. And then you have Neidal, which is the seashore. Now, Neidal is where you have anxious waiting of the lovers. So there is some kind of separation that keeps them apart, and there is a lot of pining, there is a lot of pangs of separation that they experience, where they anxiously wait for the return of the person. Sometimes the lovers have drifted apart, and the woman mourns the loss of the absence of the lover also. So that is Neidal. Then you have Mullai, which is forest land. Mullai is again associated with waiting, but the waiting here is for the return of the beloved, and the return usually happens during the rainy season. So, like in April with its shower sweet that Chaucer talks about, the coming of spring or the coming of monsoon season means that the lover would return to the beloved. So that is the part, the irithal that we speak about when it comes to Mullai. Marudam is a cultivated field where the lovers are separated. They're separated because the mother has found out about the clandestine meeting. The parents have separated them. Sometimes it is the wife who is waiting because the husband has gone away with the mistress. So all of these are associated with the piridal, or the separation of the lovers. So associated with that emotion. The last is you have Palai, which is the desert wasteland. And within Palai, you have Again, the separation of the lovers, there is parting. The lover has left because he is either gone off to fight in a war, or he's gone off to prove himself by making money and coming back to her. But again, there is some kind of a separation that has happened. That separation can bring them back together. But mostly Palay poems would deal with the pangs of this separation of these two lovers when they are apart from each other. Now, as I said, the reader, how would he or she understand how these poems work? For them, these colophons or turai that comes with the poem, the notes that are attached to the poem, they help a lot. So you have within the turai, you have the speaker. Mostly the poems will be like what she said, what he said. So you have the speaker, and then you have the listener. The listener would be the lover himself, or the friend of the girl, the beloved, or the mother or the stepmother in most cases, who is listening to her speaking to a friend. So all of these, the Ketpur, the listener is very important. Then there is the specific theme that each particular poem conveys. So in a poem like what she said to her girlfriend when she returned from the hills, that is one of the poems, here you would have the girl telling the girlfriend about meeting the lover on the hills. He is from the hills, they get to meet in the hills, and she will discuss all that they did together. So this colophon, it kind of helps you to understand where the poems are going. But the poems themselves are very depersonalized. Depersonalized in the sense that the subject, the audience, the location, everything is anonymous. So you have characters who are not mentioned by name, but they are archetypes. So there is the archetype of the hero, the Talaivan, the heroine, the Talaivi, the girlfriend, Tori. There is the stepmother, the foster mother, Sevili. Then there are these passerby people in the community. So all of these are archetypes. These personas, they are put within a conventional context that the Tolkappiyam describes. And these are the conventional contexts where they meet. So the friend of the heroine will speak only when the heroine is abandoned by the lover, or when she helps them to elope, or when she's comforting the grieving mother. So there is a structure to these poems. They are all depersonalized, but they are part of a very classical context, very conventional in form. Now, why am I stressing on this conventionality? Because that is an important element of these poems that A.K. Ramanujam would also talk about. Now, let me move to this would make sense when we look at the poem. Now, I'm moving to the first part of my title, which is defamiliarization, because the paper is going to talk about translating these poems, but looking at them in terms of defamiliarization. Viktor Shklovsky, one of the proponents of this theory, a Russian formalist, he says the
ചേച്ചിയുടെ ഫുൾ കണക്ഷൻ പോയിട്ട് എല്ലാം അങ്ങ് ഓഫായി. ശരിയാണ്. പ്ലീസ് ഈശോയെ, എനിക്ക് അറിഞ്ഞൂടെ എന്തു ചെയ്യും. ആതിരേ, നിന്റെ ഫോൺ കൊണ്ടുവന്നേ.
This is somewhere where we want to place our I know the introduction is taking quite a while, but I have to set the context before we start looking at least 2 or 3 words. Now, Meenakshi Mukherjee, when she speaks about translation theory, when she uses the term
translator trying to make the text closer to the translated culture or the target culture. That becomes domestication, making it easier for the reader. And the opposite of that would be this defamiliarization. So when you take this concept of defamiliarization into translation, the role of the translator becomes very visible. Now, when it comes to A.K. Ramanujan's translation, this is what he has to say. A.K. Ramanujan translating Sangam poems into two different collections. One is called Interior Landscape, the other is called Poems of Love and War. He says when he looks at translating these poems, his focus has always been on fidelity. Why is fidelity important for a translator? In his own words, he says, when I translate someone else's poetry, I can't take liberties with it. The experience of each language is different. So when you have to find equivalence in another language, you need to do it faithfully. So when he is translating other poems, even if it is in his own language, it is somebody else's poetry, fidelity is an important concept. And when we speak about fidelity, this is what he has to say. He is not just talking about fidelity of
എന്ത് ചെയ്യാനാണ് പറ. ഹലോ ഹലോ ചേച്ചി, എന്റെ ഫുള്ള് മൊത്തത്തിൽ ഓഫ് ആയി പോയി കേട്ടോ ലാപ്പ്. ഇപ്പൊ എന്താ ചെയ്യുന്നേ? ആരാണ്ടൊക്കെ ജോയിൻ ചെയ്യുമ്പം അഡ്മിറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ല. ഇതിപ്പോ ഞാൻ പോലും കോ ഹോസ്റ്റ് അല്ല ചേച്ചി കേട്ടോ. ഇല്ല, ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞില്ല അങ്ങനെ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റാഞ്ഞിട്ട് അങ്ങനെ വെച്ചിരുന്നതാ. ഞാൻ ഇപ്പൊ എന്താ ചെയ്യാന്ന്? ഞാൻ ചേച്ചി ആക്കുന്നേ. ഞാനിതിപ്പോ വിചാരിച്ചു റെക്കോർഡിങ് മാത്രല്ലേ ചെയ്യുന്നേ, അവിടെ കുഴപ്പമാവണ്ടെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ് അന്നേരം അങ്ങ് ചെയ്താൽ മതിയെന്ന്. അത് കുഴപ്പമില്ലാന്നല്ലേ. ചേച്ചി ഒരു കാര്യം ചെയ്യും, നിമ എനിക്ക് മെസ്സേജ് ഒന്നും പോകുന്നില്ല. നിമയുടെ അടുത്ത് അങ്ങനൊന്ന് പറയൂ, നമ്മുടെ വെബിനാർ ഇംഗ്ലീഷിന്റെ വഴി ഒന്ന് കേറാൻ പറ്റുമോന്ന്. അന്നേരം അവർക്ക് അഡ്മിൻ ആയിട്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും. ഒന്ന് ശരി, ഞാൻ അപ്പോഴത്തേക്ക് നോക്കാം. മിസ്സേ സോറി കേട്ടോ, ഇതിപ്പോ നെറ്റ്വർക്ക് ഞങ്ങളുടെ ഈ പ്രശ്നം വന്നേക്കും കേട്ടോ. ഇത് ഓഫ് ആയി പോയേ. നോക്കട്ടെ, ഒരു മിനിറ്റ്. കഷ്ടമാണ്. നിങ്ങൾ പെട്ടെന്ന് ജോയിൻ ചെയ്യൂ. ഹലോ നിമ, നിമ ജോയിൻ ചെയ്തോടാ? വെബിനാർ ഇംഗ്ലീഷിന്ന്. എടാ കൊറേ പേര് വെയിറ്റ് ചെയ്യുക കേട്ടോ, ഇങ്ങനെ മെസ്സേജ് അയക്കുന്നു. ഒന്ന് പെട്ടെന്ന് ജോയിൻ ചെയ്യണേടാ. ശരി. മിസ്സേ കുറച്ചൊന്ന് വെയിറ്റ് ചെയ്യ്. ഇവിടെ കൊറേ പേര് ഇങ്ങനെ മെസ്സേജ് അയച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. എനിക്കിതൊന്നും ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ല കേട്ടോ. ചേച്ചി ഞാനും വിളിച്ചു, ഒന്ന് പെട്ടെന്ന് ജോയിൻ ചെയ്യാൻ പറഞ്ഞു കേട്ടോ. ആരാണ്ടൊക്കെ ജോയിൻ ചെയ്യാൻ നോക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, പറ്റുന്നില്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞൊക്കെ മെസ്സേജ് വരുന്നു.
Solved in the last line with the word garden and nothing. Now, what are these three elements mentioned? The earth, sky, and water. Why are they mentioned? Because what the girl is stressing is the greatness of her love, the depth of her love, and the intensity of her love. Dilepino peridi, greater than the sky. Sorry, land. வானினும் உயர்ந்தது. உயர்ந்தது in the sense again greater than the sky, and நீரினும் ஆழம். Right? Now, the Kurinji flowers and the bees that are represented by this word honey, Kurinji teen,